What about the other sector other than food, like service? You were
Mhm.
talking about service industry. Islamic banking has already been
That's
introduced
right.
in Pakistan and
Yes.
it's working, and it's all over the world it's working. How far uh, Pakistan has been successful in transforming to Islamic banking, in
Mhm.
your opinion?
I think, to be honest, in my perception before I even came here, I thought that all banking in Pakistan was Islamic, was Sharia compliant, but I've been corrected so far. But I think what we see is that a lot, or the bulk of transactions, financial transactions, are in fact Sharia compliant in Pakistan. And talking about Islamic banking, we've seen that sector develop in a silo almost on its own, and we have the halal sector growing at a different pace. But in fact, the two sectors are synergistic. They should be integrated together. And in fact, Islamic banking has moved a lot faster. So we're actually learning from Islamic banking about how it evolved. It also went through a similar evolution of having very fragmented standards and different people agreeing of what was Sharia compliant and not. And we've taken a lot of heart and lessons from that industry. And I see the two coming together and converging in that they support each other. I mean, to produce halal products, you should also be using halal financing. So I think the dialogue between the two sectors is encouraging, and we've always promoted Islamic finance together with halal.
How would you compare it with the Malaysian banking system?
We've I wouldn't know so much about how it's developed in Pakistan, but in Malaysia, we started off with, in fact, the Pilgrim Fund was probably the first Islamic or Sharia compliant financial services company. And our central bank has undertaken the role of being the regulator. So I think it's quite unique in that the central bank would actually take on this role. Other organizations like IOFI in Bahrain, I think, is supported by government, but it's more industry-led and has membership from the industry. But the Malaysian government has always taken this role of being proactive and getting their hands stuck in. Even, for example, with halal certification is currently being done by the Malaysian government. The Malaysian government is the authority that does halal certification.
As you have already said that there is a great demand for halal
Mhm.
products throughout the world. At what rate the demand is growing?
Okay, last statistics I saw, it varies according to country, obviously. Partly because of incomes are rising, so people are just eating more, and then there's also the population growth. So it's in the teens. If you average it across, it's maybe around 14 to 15%, but it varies. Some countries are showing almost like 30, 40% growth, simply because of the population growth as well as conversions. And this is something which is interesting in that Canada, this Canadian was telling me that the rate of conversion in Canada is about 10,000 a year. And this is a completely new sector of growth.
Is that the reason that it has been calculated that by 2025 the Muslim population is going to be, I think, 30% of the world, as
Yes,
if I'm not wrong?
that's right. Yeah, I think it's two things. One is the high fertility rate, or the
Fertility.
low mortality rate, if you
Obviously.
like, and there's also conversions. The statistic from the video was correct in that Islam is the fastest moving and fastest growing religion. But it's two factors. It's the organic growth as well as the conversions.
There's a perception that as the resources are limited and population rate is growing at,
Mhm.
at a very alarming rate, especially in the regions like Pakistan and the developing countries. So whatever we earn as a nation, as a country, the rate of population is growing so fast that that population is consuming most of the growth.
That's right.
So how can you, this idea is not compatible with the idea of growing Muslim population as a whole, and your calculation, your anticipation and your reliance
Mhm.
on as a businessman.
Mhm.
How do you find it?
I think there certainly will be a strain on resources. I mean, let's go back to Pakistan again. Yes, there's a big potential for an export market, but then there could be a danger that there might not be enough to feed the domestic market. It is a huge growing and fastly growing domestic market. So then there will be a strain on natural resources domestically. And I think this is where the OIC, or at least the wealthier OIC members, perhaps should take a proactive action in reverse investment and going to areas like Brazil and Australia and doing vertical integration and investing in the upstream activities there. So the production of halal products need not take place in your country, in Saudi or in Dubai. It can take place in Brazil. But the ownership and control of that supply chain should be under Muslims, ideally. So this is one way to overcome the challenge. We have the petrodollars within our ummah, and we should use them wisely to ensure food security.
After 9/11, the international response or international reaction has been hostile, especially for Muslims, as we all know.
Yes.
Does in any case you think that this hostile response can harm your business
There
calculations or your
yeah.
business anticipations?
There is an element of that,
especially
yes.
because of this particular word halal.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll tell you a real life example. There's an exporter from Malaysia who was sending their product. It's a frozen food product to the UK, to the mainstream hypermarkets.
Okay.
And the hypermarkets actually asked them to remove the halal logo from their packaging because he said the Arabic writing might offend their non-Muslim customers. And this is an actual case.
Okay.
So this does happen. But
so how far has you people been able to defend it or to overcome this
again,
hostile phenomena?
it goes back to awareness. Some societies within Europe are much more discerning. They understand it better. They're more exposed to Muslims. They know what halal is about, and they can even define it very well. Which is one of the reasons why we're holding a World Halal Forum Europe in November, inshallah, to be held in Hague, in Holland, so that we can reach out to non-Muslims. The target audience is not really Muslims in Europe, but it's actually the non-Muslim producers. And even NGOs, they should just come and listen and just learn a bit more. The other traditional enemy, if you like, of halal has been the animal welfare groups. They've always been vocal in trying to ban ritual slaughter.
Okay.
So this is a strong movement in Europe and in the US,
Yeah.
Particularly in Europe, and they've gone to the extent of
They say it's a more painful process.
this is what they claim.
Yeah, they claim.
And they have some scientific findings,
Yeah.
and they share it with me. I mean, I'm in dialogue with them. I take them head on.
Okay.
And what I found was that working with the animal welfare groups, actually, we agree on most things. This is the funny part, is that when it comes to, say, stunning, pre-slaughter, stunning is where the discussion breaks down and argument starts. But I said to them, okay, let's take stunning out of the picture for a moment.
Okay.
And let's talk about everything else. And we found that when we talked about everything else other than stunning, that we were in agreement, in alignment at least. So it's a matter of dialogue. I think we can't erect barriers and say, okay, they're not with us, or the kosher group is not with us. But actually, in fact,
So it's a
I work
continuous
very
process
closely. That's
to
right.
make them understand, to
Exactly.
create awareness.
That's
Okay.
right, yeah.